Hi, I'm Nicole Truitt, and today we're going to be talking about the Unit 1 material, What is Critical Thinking? There's a lot of information in the course, and I absolutely expect you to go into the course and click on all of the links, read those web pages, view those videos, or do those activities. But I'm also going to try and focus today on some of the things that I think might need a little additional clarification. So we're going to be talking about what is critical thinking, which is the overview of this whole course, this whole semester. What is it that we are going to learn, and why is critical thinking so important? So I don't usually show videos in my videos, but I think this is a good one to get us thinking about critical thinking and what it is and why it's important. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this. It's not super professional and the sound is going to be a little bit tinny, but hopefully it'll work.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are two people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's nothing else left to do. Is there?
So the video goes on from there, but I'm going to stop it at that point because I do have a limited amount of recording time. And I think that that captures the idea, right? We would never be the people on that escalator, right? That would be ridiculous. We all know better. But what I want to try and get you to think about is how, figuratively speaking, when it comes to critical thinking, sometimes we are the people on the escalator. Sometimes we might in the future be those people. So anytime that we've ever had a problem and we could have solved it, but we chose not to, sometimes we do that out of fear. Sometimes we do that because we don't know what the right answer is. Sometimes we don't want to admit that there's a problem, or we might be used to other people solving problems for us. Think about someone who's recently moved out and still kind of wants their parents to help them manage something in their life, right? Or think about someone who's in a relationship that's maybe not very healthy for them, but they refuse to see that, or they refuse to do anything about it. Sometimes in life, we are those people. Sometimes we don't solve our own problems. And so critical thinking is a tool that we can use to help us not be those people as often, right? We want to be able to solve our own problems. We want to be able to navigate the world and think about things clearly and carefully and make good decisions. So these next few slides I'm going to go through very quickly. These are the questions that you should be able to answer once you've finished reviewing all the materials for this unit. These are the terms that we're going to cover in this unit, both in this video and also in the resources in D2L. So I typically ask students to jot down something about how would you define critical thinking in your own words. You can pause the video and do that if you want. This is the textbook definition of critical thinking. There are a lot of ways that you could define it. I just picked this one. Critical thinking is a reflective, rational process that is used to make good decisions or to form beliefs that are more likely to be true. So critical thinking is part of what we are asking you to do. We want you to think critically, read critically, and write critically. Character traits of critical thinkers. So this is important because all critical thinkers tend to share a set of personality traits. So we're going to go over them very briefly today. So critical thinkers tend to be curious, which means they constantly want to know more and learn more, and they like to ask questions and get more information, right? They tend to be reflective, which means that they are thoughtful, when they consider a problem or a question or an issue or a topic on the news, they think about different perspectives. They think about different sides of it, and they try to think about what they know and what they don't know and what could be happening, right? They don't just make snap decisions. They're reflective. They reflect on the ideas a little bit more thoroughly. Critical thinkers tend to be humble, and humble is the opposite of arrogant, right? People who are humble tend to recognize their own flaws, sorry, and faults. So in terms of critical thinking, being humble means admitting that you don't have all the information, or that you don't know everything, or that you're not an expert, right? If you're watching something on the news, instead of criticizing a policy, say to yourself, well, gosh, I'm not really an expert on Israeli relations, so I don't have the information that I need in order to be able to judge whether this is a good policy or not, right? Instead of taking other people's words for it, you have to kind of like recognize that you're not an expert. You have to be open-minded and consider multiple perspectives and points of view. Critical thinkers tend to be lifelong learners, which is just what it sounds like. It just means that they constantly want to be learning something new. They're always interested and curious. It goes back to curiosity. They also tend to be skeptical. Skeptical means not believing everything at first, right? Being able to ask questions and doubt things until you get some evidence, right? So don't just believe everything that you hear or read or see, to realize that there's probably more to the story and to be willing to question that. Critical thinkers focus on reason, logic, and facts, and statistics, and science, instead of focusing on emotion, right? We don't want to make decisions based on our emotions. Usually, we want to have some reason, some logic behind those decisions. Avoiding black and white thinking just means to consider that everything is very complex, right? There's no easy answer. Most things are not just black or white. There's usually a multitude of perspectives and points of view and elements, things that play into the discussion. Everything in life is pretty complex, and if you try to boil it down and make it too simple, you're probably missing a lot of the conversation. So you want to avoid black and white thinking. Things usually aren't either this or that. There's usually lots of shades of gray in the middle. And critical thinkers are able to tolerate ambiguity. Ambiguity is the idea that we don't know something, right? Uncertainty. So you have to be able to say, well, I can't decide right now, or I don't know. I have to wait and see. I need more information. It's okay to not know everything in an instant, right? We probably all know people who just form really quick snap decisions and then they insist that they're right. But the better perspective or the better process is really to take your time, admit that you don't know everything. Remember, be humble. Be curious and learn more about it. And in the meantime, you have to kind of be ambiguous and say, well, I'm not sure yet. I'm still thinking about this. So those are some of the character traits of a critical thinker. And there are a lot of advantages to doing this. It helps us to build our intellectual independence. We can learn things on our own instead of relying on others. We build a self-discipline to study and to learn things. We can communicate better, which means getting our point across better, but also listening better to others and hearing them and being able to compromise. It gives us a sense of personal responsibility and does make us better able to find solutions to the problems in our life. So finally, barriers to critical thinking. There are a lot of things that can prevent us from thinking critically. Confirmation bias essentially is the idea that we pay attention to the information that supports what we already believe. So if you're driving on the highway and some car cuts you off, you're immediately going to look at their license plate, right, to see if they're an out-of-state driver. And if they are, you're going to be like, ah, I know it, those New Jersey drivers or whatever, right? Right? This is something that we hear a lot about in Sussex County. But I will point out, there probably have been a lot of times when someone from out of state was just driving along beside you in the next lane, not bothering anyone, not driving too fast or too slow, not cutting anybody off, just driving fine, and you didn't notice them. So you don't notice the instances that don't support your belief. You only notice the times that fit in with what you already believe about out-of-state drivers. So that's an example of confirmation bias. False memories just comes from the fact that our brains are fallible. We make mistakes. We have flaws in our memory. First of all, we tend to make ourselves the center of all the stories when we look back. And we also tend to make ourselves the good guy, right? We want to be the hero of the story. We don't want to be the one who did something wrong. So over time, our memories will shift to accommodate that sort of thinking. So you have to really be careful when you're thinking about something in the past. If you've ever had an argument with someone and you were like, no, that's not what happened, it was like this. And the other person was like, nuh-uh, it was something else. And you were like, no, it was like this. And they were like, no, it was like that. It can be really frustrating. But as right as you think you are, they also think they are right. So you have to be aware of that. Lack of information can prevent us from making good decisions or being a good critical thinker. We talked about that earlier, and you have to admit that you don't have enough information. Perception limitations is another thing that can prevent us from being a good critical thinker. And perception limitations really just means the idea that our reality is based on what we can see and hear and sense with our 5 senses. So we tend to have a skewed version of reality because we can only see so much, right? And we have to maybe recognize that things are more complex than that, and that there may be, as I said earlier, information that we don't have. We might not even understand something fundamental about the situation. Visual illusions. If you've ever looked at a book of optical illusions where you were supposed to see something and then your vision shifts and you immediately see something else, that's a good example of that. So our biases, a bias is something that we believe about the world, and we don't question our bias, right? It just becomes a part of our worldview, and we think that it's right no matter what. And it's hard for us to see that other people might have a different perspective. So, for example, if you've ever encountered someone from another culture, one of the things about people have different ideas about time, or they have different ideas about relationships, or they have different ideas about death and how you handle that. And we tend to think that other people's customs or behaviors they're weird, they're strange, right? It's that they're not doing something right. But the truth is they're just doing it from their perspective. They have their own bias that is driving the way that they are behaving. So we have to recognize that a bias is a barrier to us being a good critical thinker. So we have to be able to recognize our biases and kind of get around them. Interference, this just means that there are lots of things that can interfere with us being a good critical thinker. And we know this, right? We know that being really tired or, drinking or taking drugs of some sort, even something like cold medicine, right, can kind of alter our thinking process a little bit. We get kind of fuzzy, right? And then finally, our beliefs. So our belief is something that we just believe about the world. It's similar to a bias, but it can be different because in many ways, a belief is something that we've been told by an authority figure in our life. Maybe our parents, maybe our teachers or our pastor. Somebody has passed along this belief that XYZ is bad or ABC is good. And we tend to just believe what we've been taught, especially when we're younger and we're sort of like finding our way in the world. But we have to recognize that beliefs are not good critical thinking. And we have to, I'm not saying to get rid of your beliefs, but you have to be able to think critically about them, right? And understand why you believe them and know that you believe them because you believe them and not just because someone has told you to believe them, if that makes sense. So that's a quick overview of critical thinking. We have a lot more to cover in this course, but hopefully that gives you an idea of essentially why this is so important and what we're going to be learning.